continent's first COVID-19 vaccination plant, located in the Eastern Cape, is now at risk of closing its doors after receiving not a single order, according to a company executive. The plant was initially opened as a catalyst to get more people vaccinated in what was an under-vaccinated continent, still is, some would say. So to help us understand the ripple effects of such a situation is Dr. Nicholas Crisp, who is the head of the vaccination program at the Department of Health. Dr. Crisp, thanks very much indeed for coming on. How do we read this latest development insofar as this manufacturing plant, this Aspen plant, is concerned?
Morning, Michelle. And good morning to the viewers. So I can't speak on behalf of Aspen. They will know what they have planned. But generally, what we're experiencing globally is that the vaccine supply has slowed down dramatically. Countries are now trapped with large numbers of doses in storage, and the uptake of vaccines has decreased dramatically. So we're all sitting everywhere across the world with surplus supplies. And what that means is if you're in the pipeline for producing and distributing vaccines, that nobody's buying because there's nowhere for them to go. I think that is the ripple effect that you were talking about.
So, Dr. Crisp, for us here in South Africa, you say that we're also included in that list of countries that are now sitting with the stockpiles of vaccines. Does it mean that once those vaccines run out, that we still have others that are coming in due to pre-buying?
So in our case, Michelle, we have 22.5 million doses of vaccine in the country. More or less half of those doses are Pfizer vaccine, and the other half are Johnson & Johnson. Now, Pfizer vaccine expires on about 8 to 9 months after we receive delivery. It's also stored at very cold conditions at -70, so it's more difficult to maintain over a long period of time. And many countries are not in the favorable position that we are with very good logistics. The other half of the vaccine we have in stock at the moment is Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It was manufactured here in Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha in the plant that you're referring to. And that vaccine is in our storage. Government has already procured it and taken delivery of that stock. But fortunately, it only expires in 2023. So we have a lot of time to use that vaccine still. But we are still committed to deliveries of Johnson & Johnson vaccine down the line. And we've been talking to the Johnson & Johnson company to delay the delivery so that we postpone the expiry date as long as possible. So now, obviously, other countries find themselves in the same position. And if the plant is now either not able to produce because there are not sufficient orders, or they have to slow down dramatically in their production, it impacts on all of us for what happens next year.
Yeah, sure. And Dr. Crisp, you're talking about Johnson & Johnson vaccines which were procured from this Aspen plant as Spinovacs.
Well, we don't buy from Aspen. We have no arrangement or no agreement or no direct relationship for vaccines with Aspen. We have a relationship with Johnson & Johnson, but we know that Johnson & Johnson manufactures, well, first of all, it was fill and finish, and now they're doing a little bit more than that, including in Gqeberha here. And we know that that vaccine is exported all over the world. This is one of the major manufacturing plants for the world for Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So we are just one of the countries that benefits from that. But we know the vaccine is being filled, finished, and made here.
Dr. Crisp, if indeed this plant does close its doors, and as you say, we need to speak to Aspen directly to talk about whether they did any feasibility studies, what kind of research was done before this plant was set up. But how will that impact us here in South Africa insofar as our own vaccine stockpiles are concerned? And from what you're telling me, it doesn't sound like it will.
So from a user perspective, we have enough vaccine for the whole of this year and into next year. Even if the Pfizer vaccine expires and we are left with only Johnson & Johnson vaccine, we have a lot in the country and a lot of commitments still. So we are not in trouble in terms of the availability of vaccine against COVID. Of course, COVID is not the only disease we vaccinate against. At the moment, it's focused our mind. But we are using vaccines for many different diseases, and we would like to see that these vaccine bottling, fill and finish and development plants are able to prepare vaccines here in South Africa for far more than just COVID. So that is one of the things that I'm pretty sure that Aspen as a company has been looking at for some time. They're not the only company. Our challenge has always been that vaccines come from abroad, and it makes us extremely vulnerable because usually there's a global demand for those vaccines at the same time. And we are not the highest on the pecking order in terms of getting them. We are also a country in Africa, and Africa generally is in a far more difficult position than other parts of the world. So it's really important that we build capacity, not just for COVID vaccine, but for vaccine generally, vaccines for vaccine-preventable diseases in the continent, and we have the capabilities to do that in South Africa.
Yeah. I suppose for the next question, I'm really just asking for your opinion, Dr. Crisp. Do you think that this, even though there's no demand at the moment for this Aspenovax, the Johnson & Johnson fill and finish vaccine that the Aspen plant is producing, even though the demand is low, do you reckon it should stay open for exactly the reasons you've just outlined? Because we don't only need vaccines for just COVID-19.
Yeah, so that particular line, so I'm not in vaccine manufacturing, but I have some sense of the investment that's involved and the complexities. It's not a straightforward story, but this is an Ad26 vaccine, and that is the basis on which several other vaccines are made. So one would hope that they are able to use that plant not just for COVID vaccine, but for manufacturing of some of the other vaccines that use the same technology. Again, one would need to ask the company, because I don't know the setup of their lines within that plant, but it's a significant investment, which would be really terrible if they were to shut down.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially given, at the time when the plant was launched, there was so much discussion around the low vaccine numbers on the rest of the continent. Are they in countries on the continent, are they in a similar position as South Africa, where they've now got stock of vaccines and they've got pending orders as well?
No, not all countries. So we do, our president and other senior government officials and politicians have been extremely deeply involved in trying to support the rest of Africa. And that is one of the potentials that we have, is to use even our own stockpile and access to make these vaccines available to other countries. It's far easier with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because it is more stable. It's got a longer expiry date. The refrigeration conditions in storage are far easier than the messenger RNA vaccines such as Pfizer. So that is something that we are discussing with the African Union and with the COVAX facility to see whether it's possible to share these vaccines. The agreements are complicated, so it's never as easy as meets the eye, and there are always lots of role players that are involved. But we are in those discussions at the moment. Yes,
certainly. Dr. Crisp, let me thank you for your time this morning. The head of government's vaccination program, Dr. Nicholas Crisp, talking to us there insofar as the Aspen manufacturing plant in Gqeberha is concerned. And it does seem like, for many of the big questions we have around the story, we need to speak to Aspen themselves. Thanks very much, as always, Dr. Crisp, for coming on.